Good afternoon, and welcome to today's webinar on bullying and harassment, supporting Iowa's educators. With us today, we have from the Iowa Department of Education, Therese Jurgensen. Therese's background in bullying prevention and investigation includes that she's trained as a Level 1 investigator by the Department of Human Services in Detroit, Michigan, when serving as a social worker. She's certified prevention specialist in Iowa. She's an administrator and director of student services. She's handling bully and harassment investigations. She is the director of special education and Section 504. And for the past year and a half, she's been taking calls and emails from schools, families, and students who are struggling with the issues of bullying and harassment. So we're grateful to have Therese with us today. And before I hand it over to her, we're going to keep everyone on mute, but we are going to take questions. So you can type your questions into your webinar menu. After each section of the webinar, we're going to pause for a moment and let you type in any questions you might have from that section, and then Therese will address those questions at the end of the presentation. So thank you again for joining us, and Therese, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you so much. Before I get started, I do want to give a special thanks to the Iowa School Counselors Association. Cheryl Klein is the ISCA president, and I want to thank everyone from there for inviting me here today. Also, to my gracious host, Brittany Mori, Director of Communications here at the Iowa College Access Network. But most of all, and most importantly, I want to thank each and every one of you who's tuning in, who's listening now, or who will listen. Thank you for your work. Thank you for your passion for kids, and just thank you for all that you do. From me and on behalf of the Department of Education, we just are so grateful for all the people that are working so hard with Iowa's kids. Our today's outline, as you can see, is there. The first part I'm going to do is I'm going to just talk about bullying and harassment. We'll go over Iowa Code. We're going to make sure that we differentiate between bullying, harassment, and conflict. We'll also look at federal law when harassment affects a protected class of citizens. And finally, we're going to wrap up with best practice in schools, looking at positive, proactive, preventative cultures and what needs to happen. So here we go. The first slide I have here is just really to explain the role of the Department of Education. As you can see, the arrows go down and the arrows go up, that we are all on the same team. Iowa Department of Ed works closely with our AEAs to provide training and work out with districts and buildings and finally classrooms. When I take bullying harassment calls, one of the things I always do is then I'm going to go ahead per our protocol to call school districts, whether it be a superintendent or a principal, whoever the call would deem necessary. One time I got this long email from a parent, and incidentally it had no punctuation, but I called the principal of that school district, and I'm talking to him for about 5 minutes, and like in the middle of it he goes, "Hey, wait a minute, are you here to help me?" And it's like he couldn't believe it. But of course, everyone at the Iowa Department of Education is here to help and support school districts, the AEAs, and everyone that works for Iowa's kids. I just want everyone to know that. The other thing, like when I get bullying and harassment calls, it is not the job of the department to come in and second guess any kind of investigation or intercede in any way with that investigation. What we're doing is we're making sure that law and policy is being followed, that if there's something that would affect possibly the Office of Civil Rights, or maybe there's something that the district could just need some guidance on, that's what we do. If it is a special education issue, quite often we will then hand that over to the AEAs where they can be grounds on the feet and come and work directly with school districts. So I just want everyone to know that we're really here to help. And as I go on through these slides, I'm going to tell different stories. Some of the stories I'm going to share with you are personal stories that during the time that I worked as an administrator and did the harassment and bullying complaints. Also, too, some of the things will be from calls that I might have received this year or last year. And I will be sure that I will not share any names or information that it would be recognizable. I just want to make sure everybody understands that disclaimer. Here's the thing. Bullying is a global concern. What I want to do today is really take you down a path of empathy. We know that empathy is a social, emotional skill that we need to teach kids, but we also need to teach ourselves. And that I would just ask that you had open hearts and open minds as I lay out this information today. I'm hoping that everyone who here will be blessed and will learn something new. But the most important thing that we have to think about is that we are putting away the lie that says that bullying is a rite of passage, or kids are being kids, or, well, junior high girls are just mean. We're not going to accept that. And as we move forward with this work and sharing with schools, and we talked through this slides, I really want you to just be open to that and realize that this is not an Iowa problem, this isn't a certain school's problem, it's a global concern. Bullying is also a national concern. So back in the 1990s, you may have remembered, some of you, I certainly do, then we started looking at bullying as a very serious problem. I was in Michigan at the time, but we knew that bullying had to stop, and then we started having data and seeing the effects of schools and kids. But what's really interesting, with all the programs we've done, with all the research we've done, really, to date, there's been very little that moves the needle in regards to bullying and harassment. And that's kind of sad. Another thing I saw in the newspaper today, I'm extremely happy to see that the governor is looking closer at violence in schools. And there's a lot of different data out there that talks about school violence and kids or people that come in and do incredible, horrible, violent acts in schools. There is one common denominator, one thing that binds these people together. They've all been bullied. So here's Iowa. Bullying is an Iowa concern. And here on the left-hand side, I have our conditions for learning composite data from not this year, but from last year, 2017 and 18. And if those of you who are not familiar with the conditions for learning survey, the emotional safety questions really encompass bullying. So you can see here things like I was called names, made fun of, people left me out of things on purpose, I've been hit, violence, other students told lies, spread rumors about me, sexual jokes, threatening or hurtful messages, something hurtful has been shared with me. So those are some pretty pinpointed questions, and I really applaud the state of Iowa for being so courageous to go in and hear student voice, because that's why we're here. So let's go over to the right here. And so our data, composite data, states that 38% of Iowa students answered yes to every one of those questions in some spectrum within, whether it was 0 times or 11 plus times. 38%. It's 4 out of 10. But the remaining 62% were also affected. They had a mixture of both positive and negative. So they may have answered yes to some of them, may have answered no to some of them, but either way, we know that Iowa is a huge concern. As you also look at that graph there to the right, as we look at the composite, we have physical safety, emotional safety, adult-student relationships, student-to-student relationships, expectations and boundaries. We see that emotional safety and student-to-student relationships are at the lowest bar. Again, to me, that does speak of a problem in regards to bullying and harassment in our schools. Bullying is a brain concern. When a person is under stress, the hormone cortisol is released into their system. And what happens when cortisol is released in their system, it affects their learning and it affects their memory. Simply put, you can't make memories and you can't retain the memories. So just think, if I'm a little kid, I'm in 3rd grade, there's a couple students in there that I know when I go out to the playground or have to eat lunch, they're going to pick on me. They're going to call me names, they're going to leave me out, whatever. Well, math isn't that important, or reading isn't that important to a child who's worried about those things. And so we're going to talk more about that. We all know that bullying is a mental health concern. Another thing I'm really encouraged is that in Iowa, we're really looking at mental health and providing mental health supports. We're training our schools in trauma-informed care. We have a governor's initiative. There's a child mental health board. We're doing all kinds of things to stop kids from being isolated or having problems, and partnering with mental health facilities to help our kids. And so here you can see there's data, and it's long-term data on kids who bully others, kids who are bullied. But the one I want to, and why I've highlighted in yellow, I really want you to look at kids who witness bullying, those bystanders, whether they stand up and help other friends or the fact that they're just witnessing it. What's really interesting about that is that we're seeing long-term effects that are bullying with these kids. In essence, if we look closer at the data shows us that really, all in all, only about maybe 3 or 4% of kids are totally isolated from bullying in some way, shape, or form in our public school. There's long-term consequences when we witness bullying. And you can see here it equates them to veterans, and it's very similar as they grow older. It's just like post-traumatic stress disorder. Now you can imagine how that affects people in the workplace, not to mention, those kids that bully kids and others during their school years, very possibly they may grow up and bully others in the workplace. Something I always equate when I talk to schools or kids about bullying is, if we think about some of the bullying that happens, whether someone calls someone a racial slur or they knock their books out of their hands or a group of, people isolate someone or call them names or send them text messages, what I always ask myself is that we're preparing these students for the world of work. And if I can't do that kind of behavior in the world of work, why should we allow kids to do it? Because basically we're saying we're going to give you a pass now. But later on, that kind of behavior can really get a person in trouble, whether it's being fired from their job or just not having great relationships. And at the end of the day, we need kids in the workforce to work well and play well with others. And that's a super important reason why we really need to work on this in our public schools and our private schools. This next, I wanted you to see this documentation. This is from the world of OVEAS. It's a 2019 status report. It has it separated out from girls and boys. So what it's showing here is that what kind of things are happening to people. Students are most often bullied by being called mean names, verbal, false rumors, and being left out on purpose. Exclusion. And that's the truth. Those are the calls that we most often get, at least from my perspective. And also, as you can see here on the left, something that I've also read in research talks about, girls will often get bullied from girls and guys. So sometimes being that child, especially as the middle school years, who is a girl, can be very serious. But across the board, it's not good for anybody. Now let's look where it's happening. This is pretty interesting data. I was kind of shocked about this. I heard this during a conference and I got this data report. But really where we're seeing most of the bullying, though it is across the board, we see it in different places, it's in the classroom, whether the teacher was in the room or the teacher was not in the room. Not sure why teachers weren't in the room, but that's what the data shows. But it is happening right in our classrooms, right where we really should have the most control, have positive expectations set forth for kids, and we really need to look at that. And the other thing is, as we look at social emotional learning and we're embedding this, integrating this both purposefully, teaching our kids, as well as just integrating it in different subject areas throughout our school day, if we really teach our kids that bullying is wrong and really focusing on those positive behaviors, they will take those expectations and they will take it out to the classroom, they will take it out on the playground, they will take it into the lunchroom. It's our job to teach these very skills. Okay, so we have finished section 1. I would like you to take 60 to 90 seconds. I covered some pretty interesting information there, I hope, for all of you. If you have any questions regarding that, let's just take 60 to 90 seconds. And then Britt is going to watch this for me, and if she can let me know when we're ready to go.
I would say go ahead and continue.
Okay, so here's a super important part. We're going to talk about Iowa code. There is no federal law in regards to bullying, but we definitely have, pretty much all states have a definite code of conduct expectations that tie to the law. this is the big picture of our bullying harassment law. So in a nutshell, what we look at to see if something is bullying versus a conflict, the most important piece here is that there's an imbalance of power, right? Popularity. There was a survey that I read that went out to teachers, and still, even though we know that popular kids, I hate that term, by the way, but kids that have social power can bully people, they don't really think about that. They think about age, or they think about height, or they think about weight, or the size of a child, that would be the most important piece. But really, it's not. It really isn't. It's imbalance of power over time. And that these people, especially if you say have 4 kids against 1, there's an imbalance of power. The other part is repetition. Each time you have a bullying incident, it could be potential to be repeated or happen more than once, but also too, when we look at harassment, that can change. But really looking at that repetition is important. So let's just clarify. Potential to be repeated. So the student experiences multiple incidents or patterns of aggressive behavior. Now, here's the thing. As we sit down in our PBS teams or MTS data teams, and we're looking at things like early warning systems, we're looking at office referrals, we're looking at these different things. Look for patterns of behavior. Is there a certain kid who's getting in trouble quite a bit out on the playground or something like that? Or is there another student who is in the nurse's office all the time, doesn't feel well, or obviously with attendance? I was a part of a huge bullying case, and it did not get done for 6 years. It went to the court system, and it was extremely, something I'll never forget. It was really hard on everybody involved. The bottom line was, the day that this was revealed to me and was reported to the school, I was actually going around and finding kids, talking to kids in the lunchroom, just wondering if their attendance wasn't good, just having a sidebar conversation with them. And this particular student who had been bullied, he had missed a lot of school, and that was not common for him. And so it's really important to pay attention to those early warning systems and just different behavior from kids. Also, too, here's another story for you, is that I had a call once from a school district here in Iowa, and the teacher was pretty upset because they weren't recognizing a certain case of bullying in the school system. And what it amounted to was that there was a young man in the morning, an elementary student, and there was a group of kids, and every day a different one of those kids threw a ball at them or called them names. I mean, it was very targeted aggression. When she reported that to the administrator said, well, that's not a repeated behavior because it's different kids every time. There's many ways to look at repeated behaviors. And anytime that we're looking at this, make sure that we're looking at all angles. It's really never a cut and dry conclusion. Imbalance of power. This really throws out the stereotype if we think about those kids with social power. And one thing I want to tell you and just encourage you in is that sometimes these kids who have social power have parents that have social power. And it's very difficult sometimes to work with all families. But the reality is, in schools, we have conflict. We just do. This is a job that can have great rewards, but also can have great conflict. I believe that out of conflict, great relationships are formed. But here's the bottom line. All you really need to think about when you're doing investigations or you're talking to kids or you're looking at anything regarding bullying and harassment, know Iowa policy, know the law, know the federal laws, and then really think about what's good for kids. And somewhere in there's the truth. And usually it's pretty narrow. Because not only are we serving kids that are targeted, we also need to serve kids and teach kids that are having bullying behaviors. People aren't bullies. They have bullying behavior. And all behavior is communication. It's telling us something. Some people say all behavior is purposeful because there's a positive or a negative response. Either way, we want to look at, in the state of Iowa, really doing tiered interventions of support for those kids that are being bullied or the ones that are being the perpetrator. I think that's just so important. Don't think about the person, the parents, just really look at the child and what's going on and then reach out to parents accordingly. Here's Iowa code. Now here's what's super interesting about this, and I used to get confused about this, but we know it can be bullying and harassment if it creates a hostile school environment. Now that hostile school environment isn't for the entire district, the entire even classroom, or the entire building. What it really means is it a hostile school environment for the person who is targeted, who is bullied, right? So what that takes away are these ridiculous statements like, oh, I was just kidding, or it's a misunderstanding, or, oh, kids will be kids. I don't know what you're talking about. Because if that student who's being targeted is afraid for their person or their property, if their physical or mental health is being affected, and you can see that in many, many cases. It's very easy to really determine that, especially as we reach out to parents and look deeper. Is the academic performance compromised? Is attendance waning? Or is it not having the ability to participate or benefit from services? Do they drop out of choir? Do they drop out of basketball? Are they not coming to after-school activities? All those things. And you don't have to have them all checked off. But you definitely need to do a thorough investigation and not think about the whole district. Think about that child. Put yourself, again, for empathy, put yourself in that child's shoes. Think about those parents who are scared for their kids. And really just be honest. Be impartial. Here's something, too, that I really help coach up a lot of school districts on, is that when we are doing investigations or when we suspect that a child is being bullied, the definition for a school is that we have a preponderance of evidence. Is it more likely than not? Is it tipping the scales that bullying could occur? Because we're not Perry Mason. We don't have to go beyond a reasonable doubt. We don't need to, look at every single email. We just definitely need to see what it most likely is, right? So when we're conducting, here's the other part of that. So let's say, for example, you're conducting an investigation, the family goes to law enforcement, or you've turned it over also to law enforcement. Just because we turn this over to law enforcement does not allow the school to not conduct their own investigation. You do not stop. You need to do parallel investigations. And what I like about that, first of all, the burden of proof for police is much stronger, but also too, you can see different insights and different things with that. But just make sure that I've heard from many schools, well, I'm not doing that because the police are doing it. That is not Iowa code, okay? So you definitely want to make sure that if you have an investigation, you continue that investigation until you have your conclusion. Here's some information on cyberbullying. We know that cyberbullying is on the increase. Just makes sense, doesn't it? What I'm going to focus on here is the Iowa code that says the school becomes involved once the educational environment for that student is affected and creates a hostile school environment. Now that is a slippery slope. It creates a lot of confusion. Often too, people do things like I like to call the blame game. The law enforcement says, oh, that's the school's problem. The school says, oh, those parents. The parents say, it's not my problem, it's the school's problem, and, yada, yada, and nothing changes. But you really, an example that litmus test I use, let's say, for example, a student comes to me during the day, they have their text messages, they show me a violent text message that just happened, or they had it last night and they come into school and they're afraid and those kind of things. For me, and again, each investigation is separate and unique. You also have lawyers that you can call and double check. You have the Department of Education who can also help you with that, and we have lawyers there. But if you have any question at all, is it a hostile school environment? Please err on the side of caution and support your kids. So it's a lot of work, I understand that. But the more, my experience, the more that I did, we stopped the bullying and harassment, that we really did a good job with the investigation and then the after effects. And we were transparent, things really got better because people know that you mean business and you're impartial. This is from, I've got a lot of resources for you at the end, but this is from cyberbullying.org. And Samir Hinja and Justin Patchen are really great friends to Iowa. So you can see here, average from the year 2007 to 2019, the average is roughly 28% of kids are being cyberbullied. And so, moving forward, it's really something that we have to be aware of. Some good ideas, if you're a school district, a one-to-one school district, is that some districts are, before they hand out any of their devices, they make their students and even their parents go through digital citizenship and make sure that they have all the information they need before they get those devices in their hands. And that also outlines school policy, that those devices are not theirs, they belong to the school. And I think, looking at research to prevent cyberbullying, really a great, offense really helps in the end. So put it out front, make sure kids understand, and also too, that can be an intervention. Do some digital citizenship for kids that are caught cyberbullied or as an intervention. Okay, this is a great question. Conflict or bullying? I hear this question all the time. One thing I do want you to know is that when parents call me, I try to do a very good, thorough investigation with them, just talking about what's happening and going through anything that might be conflict or bullying. Try to work with them first and really hear them and hear their concerns. But a lot of times people do not understand the difference between conflict and bullying. A great idea then is to really put that out front in your district. And for some school districts, they've taken this video. Let me just go to the next video. This is a conflict and equal power, imbalance of power through PACER. I have given you this link in the resource, but some schools are just putting this right out front. They put it under the parent website, the student website, just to make sure that it's just a great preventative tool. And it's really something I think is very helpful for parents. I have shared this with many parents, and it's super easy, it's short, and they do a really nice job. The other place where I think bullying, harassment, whether it's conflict or bullying, we find this in our DE bullying checklist, and I've given this link as well at the end. But normal peer conflict versus bullying, including relational bullying. And again, we're looking at that huge imbalance of power, and it really breaks it down. This is also a nice screenshot. You could definitely use this as well on your website or for training. I've used this actually before I came to the department to work with kids in their home rooms and talk about what the difference is, and just had some great, talk about social emotional learning competencies and conversations, just some great integration of SEL during those conversations. Bluntly put, bullying is not about a typical conflict or disagreement among people. It's about power, pain, oppression, humiliation, and alienation. It's an unprovoked act of proactive aggression aimed at a target of lesser power. A story I'm going to share with you that's really sad. There was a little boy who had autism, and every time he went to the lunchroom, different kids would pick on him. They'd tip over his tray. They'd not let him sit with them. They'd move his fruit around, just really mean, just because that little boy wanted to sit with some kids. And so when I talked to the principal or the dean of students, their response was, well, that kid brings it on himself. He brings it on himself. So let's just think about that for a minute. He brings it on himself. Those are really the lies that we have to break down. We have to let those go and just understand that kids have skills that we need to teach them. That includes those young people that were being mean to that little boy, and as well as, helping that little boy. And we'll talk more about that in the next section, but it just really is very blatant. Another thing I just want to address is that in the state of Iowa, we have to report founded bullying incidents. And to be honest with you, our numbers are very low. And I think some of that is out of fear that, if I have a lot of bullying numbers, people are going to think we have a problem. Well, the reality is we do have a problem. We're working with kids who don't have a full frontal lobe, kids that are learning who they are. We're putting them in a building filled with all kinds of cultures and people and just ages and levels of interaction and just all kinds of things. And things are going to happen, and that's okay. But the most important piece is that we are dealing, if it is a bullying case, that we're dealing it head on and just taking care of our kids. Okay, so a lot of information covered there. Going to give you a few seconds, 90 seconds or so, to write down any questions you may have. I really appreciate the questions, and I'm doing my best to get through all this information so that we have time for questions. I'm excited. Britt, can you let me know if people aren't writing or?
No, they're writing.
Okay,
but you can probably go ahead. It looks like they're finishing up, but we've got some questions going.
All right, thanks everybody for those questions. Thank you. So here's the thing. Again, there are no federal laws that just address bullying, but there's definitely federal laws that intersect with bullying, and something that we definitely have to think about. And this is something I see very common. Schools make a lot of mistakes with this. And so I want to this really comes from my heart to really help. Again, it's like an inch deep and a mile wide. It's a lot of information. It's not really deep. And at the end of this, if you have more questions that you want to talk to me personally, I've given you my phone number and everything that you need to reach out. Most importantly, that bullying, harassment affects people's civil rights. Bullying may overlap with discriminatory harassment, race, national origin, color, sex, age, disability, and religion. If we fail to respond appropriately to the harassment of students based on these protected classes, we could be violating one or more civil rights laws enforced by the U.S. Department of Education and U.S. Department of Justice. One time I had and these people are also protected classes in Iowa. I had a student send me a voice recording. She had Section 504, and and some of these kids, they're recording. They've got phones, and we know that. She had gone up to her teacher and said, "Can I please have my accommodations to take my test in a quiet setting?" And she actually had her 504 in her hand because the teacher had repeatedly not allowed her accommodation. And on the phone, the teacher said, "You know what? I'm tired of you using that 504 as an excuse to get out of my class. And besides, 504s aren't going to follow you to college." Yeah, that was a bad day for that woman. And the thing is about Section 504, the Office of Civil Rights, those things can be personally addressed right to that teacher. And so that's a terrible thing to have. So make sure that you understand Section 504. If you do have kids that are on 504s, make sure all teachers have the steady stream of accommodations, or if they change. So all teachers are informed of the law and the importance of following those accommodations, and even more importantly, knowing the accommodations. Here again is a wonderful video. It's only 12 minutes long, and it's on bullying, harassment, and civil rights. Totally urge you to watch it. It's really well done. So here's Iowa Code. Here's all the protected classes in Iowa. I have underlined the word sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, physical or mental ability or disability. The reason I'm doing that is because these are, for me, thus far at the department, though I have had some things on political beliefs lately, this is really the most common calls that we get. And these are the most common calls where people make mistakes, that schools might make mistakes. And that's what the following slides, I'm going to do my very best to educate all of you. The other thing that we think about is that when we get calls at the Iowa Department of Education, the first thing we always ask people is, does this student have an IEP? Does this student have a 504? Is it bullying based on any of these number of things? And if that's true, if the bullying is related to these through the Office of Civil Rights, really the conversation changes, because now we've stepped into federal law. So how do we know when bullying becomes harassment? The nature of the conduct itself is assessed for civil rights violation, and you can see that here. What's interesting about harassment, when bullying turns into harassment Harassment does not need to be directed at a specific person or target. Let's say, for example, on your school buildings, there's things, racial slurs written, anti-Semitic or race or whatever it might be, and those things are on school, they're on the doors of your bathrooms, all those different things. That also can be deemed harassment. We need to make sure that our school property is beautiful, right? We can't make people in any way, shape, or form not be allowed to come into the school or not feel comfortable there. Another example that I've dealt with is that there were some Asian students, and for whatever reason, there was another group of students that would not let them in the front door and they had to go to the back. That's also a civil rights violation. But also, too, when we're going to go ahead, let's say we have an investigation, we have harassment, has been noted. What we have to do is look at the big picture. We have to make sure that we are looking at not just like, suspending that student for 3 days. We need to look farther. We need to make sure that we're doing training our students. We need to make sure that our website is up to date. We need to make sure that we're notifying parents, that the harassment has to stop, but also, too, that you go beyond that, because harassment is really, we have to deal with the big picture. This is Title IX, the Amendment of 1972. You can see that. I'm going to keep moving. Title IX prohibits sexual harassment and retaliation. So as you look at all these different things, also remember about pregnancy. But harassment can also occur between same genders. I had a call once from a parent about 2 months prior. A group of girls wore a shirt that had some sort of nickname for her daughter on it, and also all kinds of horrible sexual slurs, calling her all kinds of names you can imagine. But they were all in code, but all the kids knew about it. So this mother called the other mother of one of the offenders. So that mother, if you can follow me here, she called the school and said, "Hey, my daughter's got a shirt on today or something underneath a sweater, and it's got all these terrible things about the girl. I want to make sure that's taken off." So at that time, the school should be aware that harassment or bullying, whatever the investigation would lead to, is going on. We do not need to wait until somebody fills out a paper or files a form of complaint. The law says that if people know or should be responsible to know, you need to act. And you don't drag something like that out for like 2 or 3 months. It really needs to be an investigation, and it needs to be done timely. I want to introduce you to Dr. Chad Rose. Chad's become a very good friend of mine, and we are partnering with him, collaborating for Iowa's Kids, C4K. We've vetted this work for the past year, and we're in the interim creating contracts. But over the next couple years, the state of Iowa is going to be looking at things differently, supporting schools more, and I'll get a little bit more into that, but super excited. Now, Dr. Chad Rose, and I also led a link to the Mizzou Bully Prevention Lab, found that students with disabilities are victimized more and engage in higher rates of bullying than their peers with disabilities over time, and data would support that. Here's all the laws that govern kids who have disabilities. The Office of Civil Rights, Section 504, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and IDEA if a student has an IEP. So how do we know if something that is bullying really has violated civil rights? So here are the 4 elements. Number 1, we know the student has a disability, whether it's a 504 or has an IEP, whatever it might be, that he has a documented disability. This student has been harassed based on that disability, called horrible names, anything from stupid to whatever you can get there. Maybe being bullied like the kid in the lunchroom. It definitely was severe enough to create a hostile school environment to interfere with the learning of that student. But here's the catch. The LEA was deliberately indifferent to the harassment. The incident was reported or the school should have known. If these answers to these questions are yes, discrimination has occurred. When these kind of calls come into the department, one thing we always give parents is the phone number to the Office of Civil Rights. But here's the thing. Just because it happened doesn't mean you're in violation of civil rights. What matters is number 4. You definitely have to get to work and you have to stop that harassment. That's why I also am talking about very clearly that you don't just suspend a couple kids, right? You definitely want to do big picture and protect that student. Here's 7 key points when responding to a complaint. Really, this is from Americans with Disabilities Act, from different case law that I put together. But really, in all actuality, this is for all kids. This is for any bullying incident that you have. So once you know or should have known, you immediately start doing your investigation. You want to be prompt, thorough, and impartial. Extremely important there. Definitely, we don't want to have any conflict mediation. When you have a bullying or a suspected bullying incident, you don't bring the kids together to sing Kumbaya, right? I have had countless stories where well-meaning school counselors or elementary teachers just really believe they can help kids work it out, even though they know that it has been reported that this person is threatening or bullying. And I've had countless incidents where those children leave that mediation, that talk, and a fight ensues and the bullying gets worse. That's not our job. I always say, like in the world of work, you don't have to like everybody. You don't have to be best friends, but you definitely need to respect each other. And I believe it holds true in schools. We want to definitely focus on the target or the victim's needs. There's a pre-investigation safety plan. If it is founded, there's post-investigation. But one of the things that when we're looking at that safety plan, we don't want to look at the behavior at that point of the student who's been targeted, if in fact they have some skill deficits. During that time, we are looking at the safety and the well-being of that student and putting great supports around them. Very possibly after something like this happens, the parent will want to, or the school will want to call an IEP or a 504 meeting to see if other additional supports need to be put in place for that student. And at that time, you could talk about any kind of additional skills that they might need to be trained in. But definitely focus on that student, because that student is the one with the hostile school environment. You have to discipline the harasser. Again, just saying, 3 days out, you really should be teaching them skills. Why are they putting them in a tier 2 intervention? The other thing is, if kids want to move classes, your first option is to move the bully or the person who's doing the bullying behavior. So you don't move the target. But you never know, talking to the parents, creating that safety plan, maybe their student wishes to move. But that's a conversation you need to have. Don't just automatically switch that without a conversation. After that investigation, we have to put things in writing in a reasonable time frame. Again, that's depending on the case, and also your school attorneys, if you really have a very serious situation, can help you with that. So now I want to focus my looks like I've got about only 5 minutes. I want to spend a lot of time on this, but we can always have a follow-up conversation or webinar if we need to. What we want to really talk about is how do we make our schools utilizing the healthy indicators from the ISCA plan that Iowa has to be positive, proactive, and really utilize prevention. We know that a climate and culture that's positive, just great things happen. Great things happen for teachers, great things happen for kids. And what's really wonderful about it? It's totally doable. It's definitely a continued improvement process, but really that's our goal and our aim, that kids love to come to school. At the end of all the conversations, usually I always say to whether it's a parent or the school, I always say, you know what? At the end of the day, no matter what's going on, our goal is that this student loves coming to school, that they feel safe, and most importantly, that they can learn. Here's our healthy indicators. And so I've given you all the healthy indicators here, but when we're talking about bullying and harassment, first and foremost, we want to use data-based decision-making. Look at those early warning systems. When you sit down with your teams, your PBIS team, your NTSS team, your data teams, look at school, look at the individual data and really look at things, whether it's been reported or not, find out where common areas are, and, et cetera. We all know about that. The other thing is universal instruction. What we're doing in the state of Iowa is we're going to take down silos, and we're integrating the work within a positive behavior MTSS framework. And so universal instruction is going to be embedded within the day. It's not necessarily that we're going to say, well, now we're going to talk about bullying, or now we're going to talk about SEL, or here's our curriculum. What we really want to do is have that universal instruction embedded and integrated throughout our day. Intervention systems, I'm going to talk more about that. Leadership. Okay, so leadership puts these things together, our systems, our processes, what's going to happen. They create the website. I wanted to speak to leaders today that it's so important that you reach out and make sure everyone in that school knows what's happening. I had a situation in a larger school. A parent came in and said, I want to fill a bullying harassment complaint form out. And the secretary said, hey, we don't do that anymore. Of course they did. But something had changed, but she wasn't aware. So we need to make sure our paras know, our lunchroom, definitely our bus drivers. Make sure that that system that you put in place is clearly understandable, it's on your web, and that you definitely can communicate that, who's doing investigations, etc. And then the infrastructure, totally important. This is from Mentors in Violence Prevention at the University of Northern Iowa. If you're not familiar with the work of Alan Heisterkamp and a team surrounding him from Mentors in Violence Prevention, please do so. But we know that bullying does not start at the school doors. It affects that individual and their sphere of influence, as well as their relationships, your entire community, school community and beyond, and then society at large. So when we're talking about bullying prevention, we want to look big picture. Here's a screenshot, PBIS, that was put together by the AEAs and the PBIS state leadership team. And what we're looking at too is that we want to create, and we're going to continue this work, to really have a robust universal tier for expected behaviors, so kids know how to act, to address really how do we act in all situations, understand that, reinforce that, teach it, reteach it. And then for those kids that are bullied, or maybe are a bullied victim, or they're also just targeted, or they're a victim, we need to look at targeted tier interventions and put them in groups. And if it's really serious and they really have some serious needs, you could go to that intensive tier. But we can't just say, well, we suspended those kids or we talked to them, it's all good. We need to go beyond. And that's my challenge to you today, to look at this as a serious, you might have behaviors going on, but there may be something deeper. And so I'm really encouraging you to look deeper. Here's a wonderful slide. I believe came from Castle and it was also shared at the state leadership team. So we're looking at why I put the word classroom in here is that earlier we saw that a large majority of bullying is happening right in our classrooms. So we want to make sure that we're integrating SEL instruction, that we're explicitly teaching that, as well as integrating throughout the day. So because SEL, if we look at my word is escaping me, but we look at how to teach that and what to do. The state has given you a lot of great resources, and we will continue to do that. But also, too, adults need to think about their social and emotional skills and how they're interacting. So you have a supportive environment, explicit SEL instruction, and then the integration. This, again, we can have more information on that. I would not be the person to give that to you. Kate Augustine has led the work at the department and has just done a wonderful job in accordance with C4K and different schools throughout Iowa and the AEAs. But SEL is key. SEL is key here. We're people first. Here's a screenshot about things that educators can make things better or worse. You can look at that later. Training programs encouraged. In Iowa Code 280.28, we are definitely encouraging people to have programs every year. Definitely encouraging people to train everybody in your school system. Make sure that you develop a system to address all bullying and harassment complaints, and that people throughout the district, including students and parents, know that. Also, too, here's something that's really, really important, procedural transparency. Make sure that your website is just, it's very easy to find a place to fill out a complaint, whether it be anonymous. Definitely want to look at that it's easy to find. They shouldn't have to go into your board policy to find it. Not many people know about board policy, but that a really great place to put it is under a student tab and also under a parent tab with opportunity to fill out complaints and along with your system. Here's some great training opportunities. Right now, coming in the fall, there'll be an updated bullying information and prevention module. And then there's other things right there listed through the Department of Ed, and you can find that on our website under bullying. Here's a whole bunch of support that when you get this back, you can click on and find out more from all these different wonderful things. And this is all the information I shared today. And here's also an outline of what really great effective programming is. So it is now 4:20, and my goal was 4:21. My goal was 4:20 to answer a few questions. So thank you. Thank you for listening, and let's have some questions. I'm excited.
All right, first question. Many cyberbullying experts look at cyberbullying as a new location for bullying rather than a different form of bullying. What would you say to that?
Yeah, actually, I don't know how the law will frame around that, but definitely at different OVS trainings I've been at, they talk about when are we going to quit calling cyberbullying something out there somewhere. Rather, it's a place where kids hang out. This is where they hang out. It's real to them. And so how that will be addressed, I don't know. Again, you guys, if you go on cyberbullying.org, you're going to find some great resources there for training, etc. But yeah, it's definitely important. Another interesting piece that I found out through cyberbullying.org is that there's not even any real research-based, evidence-based practices in training. You know, what are we going to do, like, to train kids not to cyberbully? So there's a lot of work to do, but it's very, very important. I think I did mention, any kind of proactive things you can do. But yeah, thank you for that question. Not sure it really answers it, but I totally understand your point.
In your opinion, normally who should do the investigation within the school, and what should this process include?
Okay, so again, the Iowa Department of Education, because we have local control in Iowa, I can't tell you that. What you have to do is, if we're going to find out, do a needs assessment. Do a survey, talk to administrators meet, talk to teachers. That whole process should be really a great conversation created within the school district. So who should do that? That would be up to the school. For me personally, and this is totally an opinion, but I'd like to see when we look at school counselors and the work of school counselors, for those of you who are school counselors, I really think that, putting that safety plan together, being that additional person is a real key. I think that's super important. But again, school districts have different protocols and different needs, and so I can't say what to do, but I definitely can say that you need a system put in place and that it's communicated broadly.
How should the school handle situations that happen outside of school via social media, et cetera, but are brought to school by students?
Again, that's where you have to think about, is it a hostile school environment? So, if something's happening on the weekend, and something happens and everybody's talking about it and someone brings it to your attention, again, at that point, you just want to make sure that you're on top of it and know what's going on. If someone reports to you that this is affecting them in their school, then you would have to investigate it, would be my recommendation. So that's a tough call. That's definitely a tough call. There's different things that happen. And that's why, again, if you have a clear system in place, it would be much easier to answer that question. That definitely needs to be a conversation for the school district.
In terms of the question about cyberbullying, new place, old place, there's just a comment that says, I think it's both a new place but also a different type of bullying because it's hard to achieve the viral reach that you have with cyberbullying and the level of anonymity you get online if you were to be engaged in traditional bullying. If you have any comments.
Yeah, and you know what? That is so true. Thank you for that comment. In fact, in that slide, I did put that. What happens is, here's the terrible thing. It's 24/7, right? They can't get away from it. The only way they can is if they don't have a phone or they block people or whatever, but that's so difficult for students. And so, yeah, it's a huge conversation. It's a huge need. And something that I'm really thinking about a lot as we head into some new work here at the Department of Education in conjunction with the Mizzou Bully Prevention Lab.
Do you have good templates of letters to inform parents? Do you recommend sending letters to both the victim and the bully? And do you send these whether it is founded or not?
Okay, so the first one I'm going to answer is the last one. Yes, you have to respond in writing whether it's founded or not. What I recommend, I would never put a student name. Like, for example, say you make one letter and then you put the names of the people. Here's the people I investigated with. This is who I talked to. You would never put a student name in there. What I would say is student A, student B, student C. And the only person you're going to talk about in that founded or unfounded letter is the parent of the person you're sending it to. So if I've had 4 people that through an investigation I know are practicing bullying behavior and doing things that are not right, I'm writing a separate letter to each one of those parents, informing them. What happens to, and the other one is as well as the person who's been targeted. Where the law, especially in the Office of Civil Rights, what we see is that when people don't give enough information, you can get in trouble. Like, you can't just say, oh, it was founded. What you want to do is give some detail without giving, you don't have to tell them every single thing, but some detail. Here was the complaint. We investigated. We talked to 6 students. Information. Here's what happened. And then really focus. It's a target. We're going to focus on that student. Here's this. We're going to put a safety plan in place. Here are components of that safety plan, but really focus on the student at hand. And that will go the same for the person if it was a founded report. Put in there. You can also put in there things that here's supports we're going to put in place as a result, or any kind of discipline measure. You don't want to put too much. You don't want to put too little. But definitely, I would never, ever, ever put a student name. In fact, when I would do investigations, I would call on a student. Say I had an alleged bullying case. And so prior to calling that student, I would call the parent out of respect for the parent, and I would say, hey, I'm bringing Johnny in today. There's an alleged bullying incident that he's involved in. Would you like to come in and be a part of this conversation, or put you on phone? We could do a Zoom. Out of respect for you, I want to have you here. Now, by doing that, what you've done is you've saved yourself so much time. And what you can also do during that time is that you have that conversation, and the child, and it might be their own perspective, does not go home and talk to their parent, and the next thing you know, it's escalated trifold. Recently, I'm just going to keep going on this vein. Another conversation I had recently is that then what are we going to do after someone's reported bullying, then the other parents come back and also put complaints. Those are things you need to set the table right away. This is what we're going to do. This is how this is going to run. This is our policy. This is our procedure. Also, too important in that investigation, have the person making the complaint write it out. Sometimes I've written it for students because they had a disability, but make sure that everything is written out, that the witnesses write everything out, because if they change their story moving on, right, then you have that. Don't do it for them. I would not recommend that, because at the end of the day, they might say, well, I didn't write it, you did. And so I'd really encourage people to allow people to put things in writing in their own hand. I hope I answered that question.
Do you have templates for letters to inform parents?
We don't. I don't have anything like that. Maybe that's something we can think about doing. But basically, if you have questions, people call me all the time. They run this by me. I give them some advice. I can't tell them what to do, but recommendations, and I support people. So if you ever have a question and need to write that, and then after you've gotten one, well, then you've got your own template. So, please reach out to the department with any questions like that.
And last question, when we share the slide deck, are they allowed to use part or all of the slides to present to their districts?
Absolutely. You would have to, keep it informed that it was created by the Department of Education, give credit where credit's due, keep the names in where I've got credit where credit is due. And I'm going to go to the next slide here if you can all see this. This is a really nice piece. I'm not going to read it. We don't have time. But here's all my information to reach out to me. So if you screenshot that, well, you can just go to the department and the bullying harassment website. But, the big thing is, let's not shut our eyes anymore. let's keep our eyes wide open. If we've got trauma-informed schools, you know, we're trying to teach trauma-informed way and look at ACEs, et cetera, let's be sure that we're not creating that for kids right underneath our nose. And we really are creating and working together and partnering. Reach out to your AEAs, reach out to other school districts, contact mentors in violence prevention, contact the department. You know, we all want what's right for kids. And super encouraged by initiatives the governor has done in looking at mental health and violence, and really working hard for kids. We want our kids to learn. Iowa is a great place to live and grow up, and we want to make that happen for our kids.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Therese, for sharing all of this great information with us. We are going to have the recording of this webinar up on both the ICAN and the ISCA websites, along with the slides by the end of the week. And there will be a survey evaluation being emailed out to those that participated today. You'll get that in about an hour. So please take the time to fill out that evaluation. That'll help Therese inform future bullying conversations from the department. So again, thank you all for joining us. And if you're hitting the road,
thank you so much.
If you're hitting the road after this, stay safe. Looks like the snow's coming down. So have a great afternoon.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Britannia. Thank you so much. Have a great night.